Welcome back. I'm Jonah here with LocalJEMs. Today we're hanging out at Steel Pony Farm. We're going to be interviewing Mike, owner-operator of Steel Pony Farms. All right, let's get to it. What are some of the processes for regenerative farming that you guys use?
Well, kind of this broad umbrella of regeneration that it's really becoming, I think, a pretty popular term now. And, there's books and documentaries, and it's a lot of social media is talking about regeneration and stuff, and they're it's so I here's a good way to talk about it. So what would be the opposite of regeneration? And the opposite of regeneration is degeneration. And so degeneration meaning what we're doing we can't sustain forever.
Yeah.
Because every year we're pulling nutrients out of the soil, we're decreasing the biology in the soil, we're decreasing the organic matter or carbon levels in the soil. And so if you look at traditional agriculture, every year, yields could be up here, and then next year yields are like this, so then you have to add more chemical inputs to get yields back up.
Yeah.
And then the next year, if you don't use those chemical inputs, yields would be down. So it's you're increasing. You can look at globally, the way that fertilizer is being used. There's this steady increase of fertilizer use and this steady decrease of yields. And so to me what that means is that it's a degenerative system, and it's taking more away than it's giving back. So then you could look at kind of the next best step would be sustainable, and this is what kind of the catchword that was maybe for the last 15 or 20 years, sustainability. But it's sustainability. Why would you want to just sustain something that is if the overall average in the world is more fertilizer, decreased yields, it's sustaining that is just this slow, steady march towards doom.
Yeah.
So then regeneration is the opposite, where it's empowering these natural systems and these natural processes, and basically working with biology to do the opposite, where that hopefully eventually you're every year using less inputs, but you're having greater production, because there is this life force and this symphony that's just trying to push life up through the earth. And so there's kind of it's not there's a Bible on regeneration, but a lot of people say that there's 5 main components, or 5 main kind of data points maybe for regeneration. And so one of these practices, it's to decrease your tillage or the disturbance of the soil. Another one is to covering the soil or using soil armor, putting armor on the soil. And so basically it means that black soil isn't exposed to wind, to water, to sun. Another one is diversity, and so it means that in any square foot or square meter you have more than just one crop growing there. You have several different crops, and the reason for that is because each of these plants have different root exudates that they pump into the soil.
Okay.
And so basically that's it's every plant, as it's growing, it produces sugars, and anywhere between 40 to 60% of those sugars at any given time are being pushed straight back down into the soil. And so they're putting the sugar into the soil, and what that is doing is feeding this microbiology community, and basically increasing their biodiversity and their numbers, and then that creates a more resilient system. So that's why you want to have a diversity of plants growing, because each different plant and plant family produces a different like kind of like flavor of root exudates.
Okay.
So if you have whatever beets growing here and then kale beside it, you're going to have a greater diversity in the microbiome. So I think that was point 3. The next one is incorporating animals or livestock of some type, and they're like the ultimate carbon cyclers. And I think you guys know lots about that for sure.
Yeah, is that something you guys practice here as well?
We have from time to time, and it's like it's not a top priority, but it's something that we've done. I've had cattle in the garden, and like a managed rotation. I've had pigs in there.
Oh, cool.
We're like brainstorming on our little. We have just like 30 chickens just for our own eggs. So we're brainstorming on like an optimal way to get them cycling through there.
Oh, sweet.
And then the last point is, I did 4. The last point is keeping living roots in the soil as much as possible. And ideally that would be all times of the year. We have challenges in our climate, obviously, with that. So, anyways, the question was like, what are we doing and how are we doing these things? And I mean, so I guess that's kind of like the philosophical answer of like what we would be doing and why we're trying to do it.
Yeah.
And then in terms of logistical response and like how we're actually managing things, I'm finding it really hard to figure out like the best path forward to maximize production, to minimize weeds, and to maximize soil health. And so starting 3 years ago, I really decreased the amount of tillage that I was doing, and for the first 2 years that was going quite well. And I just quit tilling. I added a bit of compost to the soil here and there, but what I found is that like the perennial weed pressure, so in particular for us dandelions, quackgrass, and thistles, eventually after not being disturbed for 2 or 3 years, they just developed such strong root masses that they became like impossible to manage without.
Just took over.
Yeah. So then this year, I was basically faced with a choice. Our beds are like 200 feet long, and when it comes time to like prep a bed, typically the old way is I would just like turn the rototiller on, drive down. It takes like 30 seconds to make a pass, and it's basically ready to go. So I quit doing that, but then the alternative is that we'd have to like send staff into the field, and they'd have to like hand pick these weeds and like basically take a shovel out there, and it was taking like 16 to 20 hours of labor per bed. So I went from like literally 30 seconds to 16 to 20 hours of labor. And so we were just like, there'd be like 5 or 6 people out there just like spending weeks in the spring just like picking weeds and turning it over. And so I can't run a business like that, right? Like eventually that's just gonna like bankrupt me. So this year we started doing more tillage, and we're working on like less aggressive tillage, but we just basically have to break up those perennial weed cycles. So then there's all these other ways that you can do it that we're experimenting with, and the one that seems the most promising in our environment is what they call like a deep compost mulch. And so basically you take compost and you put like anywhere from 4 to 8 inches on the top of your beds, and then that kind of smothers all the weed seeds and the perennial weeds below.
Would you do that just at springtime, or would you do that in the fall?
I mean, it's probably a process, like a continuous process of topping up those beds. And so probably ideally you'd do it like sometime in the fall for the next year, but then after you harvest in that spot the following year, you'd probably add a little bit more. You could do it in the spring too. That is properly cured, to find the right amounts of compost, because it's actually a huge investment. If I was going to do like 4 inches over my whole garden, it'd probably be like about a $20,000 or $30,000 proposition. And so it's just like opportunity cost of like what else could I be using that money for. And then just availability of compost, and I haven't found anywhere around here with the right quality and the right volume. So we're starting to make our own compost. Just over there, there's a mushroom farm down by Old/Carstairs, and we've just been getting their spent mushroom compost all summer.
Oh,
And
oh,
so that's kind of, I have a lot of all my eggs are in that. A lot of my eggs are in that basket because I really want a lot of compost, and I think to get it right, I have to make it myself.
mm.
Um,
Yeah, that makes sense, right?
yeah. So I'm kind of yammering on about that, but there's other things we're doing that are like quite effective. And so for some of our crops, especially garlic, we mulch with straw. Um, we do really, really heavy mulch in the fall. We plant our garlic in the fall, then we mulch it with about almost a foot of straw,
Oh, wow.
and then it just sits there all year. And so it's really good for the soil. It's really good for the garlic crop, and basically all of that carbon in the soil over the course of like the next 18 months basically breaks down, decomposes, and then like the earthworms and other biology kind of move it down. So it's like basically they come up and kind of eat some of the broken down stuff on the surface. They go down, they poop, and that's like literally depositing carbon deep down into the soil. And that's what like talk there's a lot of talk about like what are the best ways to sequester carbon. And I mean, to me, the best way, and there's a ton of research about this through like the Savory Institute, um, and a couple other bigger farming organizations that are doing this research, but it's like the most natural and the oldest and the most efficient way to sequester carbon is by taking crops like that, like a straw crop,
Yeah.
and just getting it down into the soil. So animals are the fastest way, but I can't have like cattle on my straw on my garlic.
Yeah,
so
you can't, yeah, exactly.
I consider earthworms to be animals, like
Yeah.
they are, right?
They're doing their part.
Yeah, it's cool to see like after we harvest our garlic, and then usually we mow that straw because there's a bit of weeds growing up in it, and then the next spring it's just like the richest area in the garden. It's like it's so fertile. It's really cool. And we're doing like a lot of as much as I can figure out how to do intercropping. And so I think I used the example of kale and beets before, but in a lot of our kale beds we have beets growing in the middle. And so it's just more stuff, right? Like there's an extra thing there where normally it would just be kale, but now it's kale and it's beets, so we're feeding that biodiversity in the soil.
And is do they have to be like within a certain distance of each other for that to work? Or is it kind of like they can be all mixed together?
Well, what we do, like our beds are like 6 foot wide beds with like a 48-inch top, and so we do like a row of kale on the outside and then beets in the middle. Maybe this is getting like a little bit dorky, but some intercropping is like really beneficial for both of the plants, and plants make these relationships with each other through something called arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, and it's like this it's like the roots of mushrooms basically that live beneath the surface. And there's lots of information about this. There's a great movie on Netflix called Fantastic Fungi that largely like features Paul Stamets.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But this mycorrhizal fungi network is basically, it's not just like an information highway, but it's also like an actual like physical goods highway. And so you can have like a plant over here that's low in calcium, and then plants over here that are high in calcium, and they communicate with each other, and they'll like transfer calcium through this mycorrhizal fungal network over to the plant that needs it.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and
amazing.
It can be a long distance too. Like it doesn't have to be like plants that are right neighboring with each other, but obviously in the same bed is going to give you the most benefits.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get that when you're using fertilizers and chemicals like that.
I mean,
like I imagine.
I've read research that says that when you use those different inputs, that you're decreasing the population of that mycorrhizal fungal network, and so then you're decreasing the ability for those plants to communicate. But I mean, kale and beets as an example. So kale is in the brassica family, and brassica plants don't make a relationship with that mycorrhizal fungal network.
Oh, okay.
And it's just a unique feature of that plant family. But to me it doesn't really matter, because it's like still if beets are there, it's like it's not just about the fungal network, it's about like the whole microbiology symphony happening down there. So like it's just good.
That's great. That's so cool. I think that's the stuff that people need to, I think, understand a little more, so then they can understand a little bit more how Earth and Mother Nature works and how beneficial your farm is.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me it's like the holy grail is figuring out how to do no-till really, really well. And there's almost like, I mean, I've heard it described as this like flywheel that's like, do you like, I guess we're kind of too young to really remember farm machinery, but there's like some of this farm machinery, instead of having like a PTO that's like gear driven, they've got like these big gears or like these big flywheels, and it just starts like going really, really fast and then has a belt and like turns something.
Yeah.
Like old mills or whatever. So think of like the soil as this flywheel where it takes a ton of energy to get that first revolution, and then like it gets increasingly easier as more and more of the population of mycorrhizal fungi and bacteria and actinomycetes and all these different things, as those populations rise, eventually it's spinning so fast and so hard that it's like you almost can't stop it. And so what I'm really interested in, and there's a few organizations like the Bionutrient Food Association in Massachusetts who are working on this kind of stuff, but figuring out like, okay, imagine if you have this like soil population that's just teeming with life, and it's like it hasn't had chemicals on it for ages, and there's like a ton of organic matter, and there's a ton of bacteria and fungi and everything. So these plants should be able to start expressing like their full genetic potential, and like what happens in these plants when they can just like put a call out and be like, oh, I'm short on iron, and then this whole community is just like, here's your iron, and then all of a sudden they don't have that roadblock to their growth anymore.
Yeah.
And I think like kind of that's what plant metabolism is all about, and like humans and animals too. It's like we do our best to strive toward health, but then we have like a shortage of a certain nutrient.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard as humans to know like what that shortage is without a lot of testing, but plants have that intelligence inside of them. So they're constantly putting out these signals that says, I need this, but a lot of times in like a disrupted soil system, there's nobody that can respond and give them the copper or the boron or the manganese or whatever. So I feel super excited, and I think for me like the big vision of all of this is to get this soil system working so well that whenever our plants need something, it's just like automatically there and it's provided. And then I'm so curious, like, so what does like the most healthy broccoli that never had like any restrictions in its growth and the expression of its genetic potential,
Yeah.
what does it look like? What does it taste like? What does it smell like? And then what does it do to our bodies when we eat it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think that like a big shame of the modern commercial corporatized agriculture system is that it's just so much of the food we eat is devoid of nutrients.
Yeah. I was gonna have a question on that. Yeah.
Right. So then I'm like, okay, well, if all our food's devoid of nutrients, how much of our genetic potential are we really missing out on?
Yeah.
And there's probably not a human alive today who like really knows what it feels like to be properly nourished.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
And I just love this idea that maybe we could get back to a place where some of us are like eating really, really healthy food. It's like, what would our mental health look like? What would our problem solving skills look like? What would our resistance to diseases and viruses be?
Yeah.
It's
That's
to
pretty.
me it's
That's
like
pretty
thrilling.
crazy to think about, because it's like it's better than medicine. Like it's like, right. Like it's there, so we should be focusing on how can we do that? How can we make it accessible to almost everybody?
Right.
And how can we solve it so that everybody's eating
Yeah.
clean. Because yeah, like you really aren't going to see that when you buy it from the grocery stores. With that was because I started doing hydro towers, and that was one of my concern. I was like, I don't think all the vitamins and everything that your body needs is going to be in these hydroponic towers.
Right.
I don't know. Like, I'm not sure. I think you'll be missing quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, my sense is that you could have a really well managed like hydroponic system that does quite a good job. Like, you could have a soil system that's got really bad health, and then a hydroponic system where you've got like everything dialed in really good, and you might have better food from the hydroponic system. But I feel like if you have that really, really healthy soil system, it's just like got to be healthier than hydroponics.
No. Yeah.
And I mean, this is dorky, but this is what I spend a lot of my free time like doing and thinking about. And I feel like the big part that we're missing in like this conversation about agriculture is a context of like how to like geological time.
It's like, go for it. Like, I just want to know, because I think the more you hang out with people like yourself, and then the more knowledge you collect, I think then people will start to understand, hey, the importance of small farms, and it goes back to the community. Small farms, it's better for the environment. You don't always have to buy everything from big corporations where it's probably not, like you said, not fully nutritional.
Right.
All right, that's a wrap for us. Thanks for tuning in. You can like, subscribe, follow us on Instagram. Make sure you go give Mike, Steel Pony Farms there, follow as well. Check out some of his merch, check out some of our merch. Yeah, stay tuned for the next one. Hopefully we can get some more local producers on. You know, I'd like to do some local beef producers, some honey producers. Hopefully we can get in touch with some of them. Stay tuned. Thanks for hanging out.